welcome to this week's edition of the Weekly Economic Snapshot. I'm here with a guest today. Would you mind introducing yourself?
Yeah, no problem at all. Pleasure to be here. Lindsay Pack. I am the CEO with dpiX, which is a semiconductor manufacturer here in Colorado Springs.
All right, so first question, easy hanging fruit. What is the CHIPS Act?
Yeah, so CHIPS Act is really the U.S. government's effort to try to bring some really fundamental and key technology back into the United States. So if you think back over the last 20, 30 years, there's been a series of endeavors where manufacturing has been offshored and engineering and those sorts of technologies have tried to stay here. But as we've offshored key technology, that engineering has followed as well. And so semiconductors or chips are one of those key technologies that is baked into all of our electronics that we use from a consumer perspective to, the super important electronics that are really the baseline for our national security as well. And the US has realized that we've really created a situation where we no longer have that manufacturing, that capability and technology here in the US. And so in order to be able to bring that back in the United States, it's going to take significant investment in infrastructure, investment in the tools to do the technology, but also from a research perspective and workforce development to really be able to bring that technology and critical capabilities back into the United States.
Thank you. That's an excellent recap right there. So, and some good information for everyone listening at home. So, how specifically is our community impacted, and what do you see as like the key benefits to our community?
Yeah, so Colorado Springs actually used to be a semiconductor hub. There was a lot of that technology and manufacturing that took place here. Unfortunately, a significant amount of it was offshored over the years. And so we have a lot of the framework and the infrastructure here, but we now have, I think, an opportunity to really reinvigorate that with the few companies that are remaining. And be able to create greater networks here in Colorado. If you think about it from an ecosystem perspective, it's the companies that are remaining here that are actually producing the semiconductors and the chips, but also who's supplying those materials and services to the companies that are producing the semiconductors and chips. But then how are those being then embedded into the needs of our community and the companies here within our community? And then how does that connect, right, with our universities being able to make sure that we're thinking about what is the workforce of the future and how can we ensure that we're building those right capabilities to be ready as we're creating those expansions. So I think from a community perspective, we actually have a lot of opportunity to be engaged with the CHIPS Act and see a lot of benefit here as well.
And then I guess you kind of answered this already, but following up a little bit, is there anything specifically we can do as a community to leverage the CHIPS Act?
Yes, I do believe so. So I will say that from our company's perspective, I know we're certainly applying for funding from CHIPS, and there's other companies within the community that are applying as well. But a lot of it, as I kind of alluded to, does relate back to that workforce development and how are we going to be able to really bring those benefits to the community. And I think we talked, briefly about where the university can play into that, but there's also, I think, opportunities for us to engage even with high schools, and how can we be partnering in education before it gets to the university level to really have some programs that are targeted in that space from an engineering perspective, but also from a manufacturing perspective. And you think about all the equipment and capabilities that are needed just to continue supporting that equipment. So how can we provide some of those technical skills to the workforce in order to meet those needs as manufacturing starts to come back to the community? I think that's certainly a key way. Also, being able to have the support from our local governments as well, from grants and other incentive programs that will enable these companies to provide those services, those connections. And then I think if we look at our community as that ecosystem, as I talked about before, I think we have the opportunity to engage more across the different groups and really build a much stronger ecosystem that is US based and able to supply very high quality and secure technology.
Fantastic. So maybe just as a kind of wrap up, what are some quick hit pros and cons as you see them?
Yeah, it's an interesting question because there's not still a ton of detailed information that's been released by the government. Just had a meeting earlier today where they said that they expect that we'll get some of that guidance in more granular detail at the end of the month. And I think that'll provide some additional clarity. Some of the questions that have been asked from a pros and cons perspective have been around what will this funding actually look like? And will it be able to actually meet the needs? And are there going to be requirements that are prohibitive to be able to actually utilize that funding? So hard to say for sure without all of the data yet available to us. But I would say from my perspective at this point, it seems like the pros far outweigh the cons. At this point in time, I do think that it is a really smart investment for us as a nation to be able to have control of this fundamental technology, as we mentioned, that is in absolutely everything that we use. So I think from my perspective, the pros far outweigh the cons.
I couldn't agree more. Thank you so much for joining us, Lindsay. I'm Joe Craig, Interim Director of the UCCS Economic Forum. And if you have ideas for future snapshots, please let us know. We'd love to interview you.